Hello, everybody, and welcome to UXDX Online series. We're hosting another great event for you tonight. I hope you're really excited to learn about some of the things that. Oh, apologies. Yeah, I hope you're really excited for the people who will be presenting later on. We have David and Valencia coming up shortly. But before we introduce them, I want to give a very quick introduction to what it is that we're doing at UXDX and what we're trying to achieve with these series. So our mission at UXDX is to help companies shift from building software using waterfall processes to more empowered autonomous product teams. And the reason why that's our mission is because we believe it's a more efficient, effective, and sustainable way of working. But that is only the case in high change environments. So if you're in a low change environment or a company that's only doing changes in one area, you build a team, they work there, and then you move them to another area and not doing very many projects, then it makes sense to use the waterfall methodology. But if you're like a lot of the companies that we see nowadays, where you're kind of continuously iterating on your products, then it makes sense to have teams that know that area, they own the code, they own the designs, they ensure that debt gets kept to a minimum. So that's when the empowered product team is the best approach. So what we're going to have is speakers sharing their experiences of how they're shifting from this kind of more traditional way of working to more modern ways of implementing software products. And hopefully from their conversations, you'll get some questions or some things that you want to clarify. So please do feel free to ask those questions, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching on our platform, whether you're watching on LinkedIn. Please share those questions through to the speakers and they'll be more than happy to answer them. Sometimes we can't get to all the questions, unfortunately, because there's quite a bit of interest. And in that case, we go to our Slack community, the UXDX community, where we have the Ask the Speakers channel. And in there, we'll post any questions that we don't have time to answer during the session today. And the speakers will go in there and answer them for you. So that's my introduction, but you're not here to listen to me today. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker for the night, and that's David Subar, who's going to be talking about culture clash, how to make product and engineering work together effectively. So welcome, David.
Thank you.
I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Rory. Thanks. And hello to everybody. As Rory said, I'm going to talk about culture clash, making product management and engineering work effectively together. And I have about an 8-hour presentation. I have about 30 minutes to present it. So I'm not going to get through everything today. I'm going to get through all of the highlights. And as Rory suggested, if you have questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to me. Here's my email address. I'll be on the Slack community as well. And I'll have my contact information again at the end. I'll give you a little bit of context about who I am and how I got here and what I'm talking about this. I was an ex-CTO and ex-chief product officer. I ran both those departments in a number of companies over a number of years. And about 9 years ago, I started this company, Interna, and we consult on product management and engineering. And our fundamental thesis, and this fundamental thing about this talk, is about product management engineering are not two teams. They're one team. They're one team that works together to build a product. And if you can achieve that, those teams can be effective. And we work with a number of companies. We do 4 things. We will go into technology companies, evaluate product management engineering teams, and come out with a diagnosis and prescription. Here's some things you're doing well. Here's some things you might want to do differently. Here's how. On that same concept about product management engineering being effective. For companies that have a CTO or chief product officer, they often ask us to coach the technology product management executives, whether their title is CTO, chief product officer or not, and help them with their teams. If the companies don't have someone, they often ask us to come in and function as interim CTOs and chief product officers, help fix product management engineering teams, and then help hire someone on. And we also do due diligence for VC, PE firms, and M&A transactions. And we've done it for a bunch of companies. The reason I'm pointing this out is we see patterns. Patterns, things we see at the Walt Disney Company, we've also seen in startups. Mid-market companies. We worked at lynda.com before they got sold to LinkedIn for, I think it was $1.4 billion. B2B companies, B2C companies. There's commonalities about product management and engineering that we're able to apply to a bunch of companies. I'm going to share a bunch with them, a bunch of those with you today. So if I have time, I'm going to talk about 4 culture clashes, and I'm going to give you 5 tools to overcome them. We may only get to 3 of the culture clashes. I'm going to try to get to at least 3 in the time that we have, but I'm going to give you 5 tools. I'm going to talk about alignment, measurement, review, transparency, iteration as those tools to overcome the culture clashes. Now, the first one is alignment. Now, I mentioned before that our view is product management and engineering have one function as one team. That means they need to get aligned, and there's really 3 stages of alignment I would talk about. People who run product management engineering, I'm using CTO and Chief Product Officer, but it really, I mean here, the product management and technology executives are really also all the people in the team. People often think their job in those roles is to optimize their team's efficiency. How do I make my team be better at engineering? How do I make my team in product management be better in product management? I have some input, something that we do, and some output. So if I'm in technology, I have some user stories that I get as input. My developers code some stuff. We output, meet the acceptance criteria. We're done. We're good. We should do that faster, better, less bugs. If I'm in product, then I have some user needs. Maybe it comes from the roadmap. Maybe I built the roadmap. I output user stories. I work with UX to put those interfaces together. Those are my outputs. And then engineering does something, I check it out, and we're good. That's what I do. I want to optimize my team to make that as efficient as possible. The surest way to create a culture clash between product management and engineering is to worry about my team's efficiency. To think about, what am I doing? Because that creates a barrier, a wall between product management and engineering. And remember, the primary goal here is that we're producing products for some industry, for some customers. We create value when we create value for those customers. And so think about product management and engineering only, thinks about what we're doing and creates that wall, and it creates finger pointing. I'm engineering. I just did what product management told me. If it's not the right thing, if the UX is wrong, it's on them. It's their fault. I wrote the code. I'm in product management. I'm in UX. If it's slow, if they're slow to produce it, that's their fault. We told them what to do. We told them when it was going to get done. They told us when it was going to get done. If we didn't get released in time, it's their fault. And it creates finger pointing, it creates that barrier that I talked about. That's the first culture clash. So the next reasonable thing, the thing I hinted at a minute ago, is to focus on a customer we serve. But that begs the question is, who is the customer? If we're going to focus on someone, who are we focusing on? Now, you'll see in many companies that product management engineering will say, we do what marketing tells us to do. Sales gives us things. The CEO has these ideas, and we just implement them. That's who our customer is. That's who we serve. You might hear people describe, there's technology, which is product management engineering, and business. There's business and there's us. And we serve what marketing and sales does, the thing I just mentioned before. But now the problem is that we have the same culture clash that I talked about doing product management engineering. We move that wall, and now we put it a different place in the company between business and technology. You see that language is poisonous, because those people in marketing and sales, the CEO, they're not your customer. They're your colleagues. Your customer is the people that pay your company for the products you build. That's how you have to focus on. So that's great. Okay. So we said there was the first culture clash between product management and engineering, which when you're only focused on your group's efficiency. So bonding it together removes that culture clash. The second culture clash is business and technology. Remove that one by focusing on customer value, recognizing that the other people in your company are your colleagues, not your customers. So that's the second culture clash. Remember, I said there's 4. So if we're really focusing on the end customer, the people that use our stuff, how do we know if we're delivering customer value? And the answer here is look at your roadmap. The majority of the activities on your roadmap should be rooted in creating direct value for the users, for your customers, for your market. By the way, those are 3 individual terms that mean slightly different things, that it's important to understand those meanings and how those are different. I probably won't have time to talk about them today, but once again, feel free to reach out to me afterwards and I will describe the differences to you and why it's important and why is it that not only do you need to understand it, but you need to use that terminology in the company and your colleagues all need to understand it as well. But the majority of things on your roadmap need to be rooted in creating customer value for your users. You should be able to measure whether your team, product management, engineering together, are able to deliver that customer value. And that has to be the primary discussion you're having. It's not about the beauty of the architecture, the elegance of the code, or how many clicks there are on the user on a UI, or even how speedy the system is. Those are all important, but the primary discussion has to be about, did you create customer value? Once again, you're trying to overcome that culture clash. You're trying to align. And then it's important that every member of the team needs to know how every story delivers value, and they need to embed it into how they think, into their soul of what they're doing. They need to be able to argue one story over another and the cost of doing it and the criteria why the stories are. And when I mean every member of their team, I mean everybody on UX, everybody on QA, everybody in product. Certainly everyone knows that. Everyone in engineering, everyone needs to understand the why. There's multiple ways to do everything. If people don't understand the why, they're not likely to consistently do the right way. And you want to engage in that conversation. Since product management and engineering are one team, you want to be able to engage in that conversation of, I understand why you asked us to do that. Let me propose something else that might get done less expensively, take less time. If the people don't know the why, they're not going to be able to have that conversation. But that all goes to understanding who the customer is and delivering value. Now, here's the nice thing about that. The nice thing is, I mentioned before that the CEO is your colleague, as is sales and marketing. The natural fallout about delivering value for your customers is product management engineering also falls into alignment with the CEO naturally. The job of the CEO is to create a sustainable company with high value. Now, here's the fundamental thesis is that customers and markets only buy from companies that deliver value to them. Why would you buy from someone who wouldn't? Revenue is a side effect of delivering value. People will buy from you if you produce things that deliver value. Profitability is repeated revenue with unit margin on everything that you sell. I'm being a little pedantic here, but trust me. Net profit is gross profit less operating expenses. Do it at a reasonable cost. And Benjamin Graham, if you've never read him, he's the guy that Warren Buffett had. He taught Warren Buffett. He wrote books, and he said the intrinsic value of a company is the sum of all discounted cash flows. Said quickly, produce profit at everything you do. If your CEO wants to create a sustainable company with high value, product management engineering is a team creating products that people want to buy because they create value from them. Makes you fall into alignment naturally with your CEO. If your teams are thinking about the customer correctly and customer value correctly, then by definition, they will fall in line with the CEO. But here's the trick, and here's something that I'm not going to be able to have time to talk about in depth. But here's the trick to know. Not everything that creates customer value also creates value for the company. Just being innovative is not sufficient. MVPs and iterations by themselves are a walk in the dark. You need to be thoughtful about not just having everything on the roadmap is going to create customer value, but being able to be intelligently being smart about what things go on the roadmap and why. This slide hides a 1-hour presentation all by itself. We can talk about North Star metrics and the value of North Star metrics. And people talk about one North Star metric. I argue that generally you don't want one, but you want a small number. How to create those, how to align those with strategy. If you're interested in this, reach out to me and I will gladly spend time with you and talk about how to put together a proper roadmap that aligns not just customer value creation, but filtering it to the things that also create value for your company. Not just falling in alignment with the CEO, but getting the product roadmap in a way that creates value. The key here, and once again, I don't have time to go into it too far in depth, is the difference between being a feature factory and a real product group. Being a real product group requires that the things that are on the roadmap that provide value for customers also fulfill the company strategy. And believe me, you want to be a real product group, not a feature factory. Because when you're a feature factory, you fall back into that second culture clash of, oh, people in the company don't perceive our value in product management engineering. And so we just do what the salesperson says to do to close the next sale, or what the marketing person tells us to do. So you have to be smart about the things you put on the roadmap that they're also fulfilling the company strategy. So I promised you 5 tools to overcome culture clash. I've only given you one. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to speed through things. So alignment's the first one. The second one is measurement. So it's not enough to know the things on the roadmap create value, but you need to be able to know what they are and report them. So which metrics do you report? Often people in engineering talk about velocity or cycle time or PR response time, and product management talk about, I created this roadmap, we finished this roadmap, we have this many user stories, this many bugs came out. And these are often the metrics that engineering and product management communicates to the CEO and to other executives. The problem with these metrics are they're great internal metrics. To run your department, Once again, to be efficient, you need to know these things, but they address activity, not outcome. Once again, we're interested in providing value to customers. These are things that we do. Your CEO does not understand what those metrics mean. If you report to your CEO these kind of metrics, your CEO not only would they not understand, but are likely to think that you don't understand what the business is doing. So I propose to you that everything on the roadmap needs to talk directly about the kind of value that it creates. And here's one formula to do it, an epic statement. It's the second tool I'm giving you. An epic statement says, we believe by doing this specific feature for this specific type of client, they will achieve this specific outcome. And we will know that when we see this metric move. So once again, what you're building, for whom, what they get out of it, and how will you know? Everything that's customer facing on your roadmap should have a statement of this roots you into creating customer value. But there's a secondary benefit to metrics. Turns out that everybody in your company, you can think of like a vector. Remember, vectors have two attributes, a magnitude and a direction, a heading. If you sum up all the vectors in your company, if they're all pulling in the same direction, you're getting maximum output. If people are doing different things, even if you hired a bunch of smart people, if they're doing things that clash with each other, you're not making forward motion. By everyone understanding the things around the roadmap and how they create value and how you'll know, you'll tend to have everyone pulling in the same direction. John Doerr, he's a venture capitalist. If you don't know him, you should probably read about him. He's a really smart guy. He's done a lot of good investments at Kleiner Perkins. Said, what we want is a team of missionaries, not mercenaries. Mercenaries are people that do what you ask them to do because you're paying them. Missionaries are people that do what they're doing because they understand and they care. By having all of the product-facing features on the roadmap have a mission statement, you've now told them why they should care and what they should expect. So we've talked about alignment, we've talked about measurement, let's talk about review. People know how to retro their sprints. The end of a 2-week sprint, they look at it, they look at the values of it, and they say, did we get the same velocity we expected? Did we perform higher? Did we not perform as well as we expected? What did we learn? What people don't think about is to retro the epics. Retro and sprints talk about efficiency. We want to talk about effectiveness. And so by retroing the value of your sprint, did we in fact, the retro value of your epic, did this epic actually fulfill this epic value? We can then ask ourselves questions of, here's what we expected, the value we expected to create for our users. Oh, we overperformed. That's interesting. What did we learn? What do we want to do again? We underperformed. That's sad. What did we learn? What do we want to change? If you retro the epics, now you have the flywheel of, we're here to create customer value. Here's what our goal is. We made bets, right? Each epic is a bet on the roadmap. These bets succeeded. These bets didn't succeed. Here's how we're going to bet better next quarter. So we've talked about alignment, measurement, review. We're going to talk about transparency and iteration all in one. Sorry, I'm speeding up a little bit here because we don't have much time. It's not enough to review the bets yourself. And this is the hardest thing. You've got to report broadly to the company about how the bets were made. You've made a promise to the company that things in the roadmap are good uses of company capital to move the company forward to create value for the customer and to fulfill the strategy. Now you're going to come and say, here's how we did. This is the hardest thing because you're exposing yourself. The things you do well are easy to talk about, but you also have to talk about the things that you did not perform so well on. I said earlier, sales, marketing, the CEO, the CFO, the board, these are your colleagues. You've got to report to them how you do. By the way, you should expect they'll report to you how they'll do. Sales certainly does that. If you have an outside sales force, here's how we sold, here's how we made quota or not. You're doing this because not just because you're colleagues, because they know things that you don't know. That epic on the roadmap didn't work. Oh, that's interesting. Here's what we're hearing from customers. If you don't have a direct sales force, marketing represents this sometimes. The CEO might know things like, here's what are the trends in the marketplace or what competitors are doing. Marketing might know that as well. The board might know those things. There might be investment criteria. We need to double down on this stuff. We can spend more money. But unless you have that conversation about how you performed, you won't know. And then you iterate. I just have a few minutes left, so I'm going to skip a whole bunch of slides and leave you with this. The gentleman who wrote the Little Prince, I won't try to pronounce his name, my French isn't good. He said this: love does not consist of gazing at each other, but looking outward together in the same direction. Product management and engineering have the same task, gazing at the same direction. How do we serve customers? How do we create value in the world? As I mentioned, I'm glad to talk about any of this stuff again. If there's stuff that isn't clear, here's my contact information. You can hit me at this contact us. I realize this doesn't say my email address, but feel free to email me directly. You can hit me on LinkedIn. Actually, the best thing to do is probably hit me on LinkedIn or hit me on contact us. And I'm glad to take any questions that people have.
Great, thank you very much, David. I really enjoyed that talk. It sung to a lot of what I'm interested in as well. We got a question in from Katerina that I think it's something that I've experienced as well. She's saying that we do internal pricing innovation, so product pay engineering to build things. So what she's asking, what advice do you give for her in trying to get alignment structure in place?
So product pays engineering, is that the way it is, or is that how they think about it?
Yeah, so I don't have the full details, but in my experience, what I've had is that product will get a budget approved, and then they'll kind of say to engineering, okay, now you're going to work for us.
Yes. So it's not terrible and it's not good. And what I mean it's not terrible is product management engineering should come to the decisions together about how much should we invest for this much value. I don't like the language of engineering, you now work for us. I like the language of engineering, we work together to provide value. And that's why understanding the why is so important for engineering to know. It's say, oh, I understand what you're asking. We can do 80% of that at 30% of the cost and give you these other features because I know the why. And so what's being described as an accounting mechanism for finance to understand what the investment is. Investment in markets and features make perfect sense because there's an ROI and a payback. But engineering is just a part of that. So part of it is you might have to accept that accounting feature of paying for engineering, but you don't have to engage in the conversation that way. And I suggest you don't.
That's some great advice. So hopefully, Katerina, that's something that you can bring back and take use of. So thank you very much, David. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you for sharing your insights, and Hope everybody out there enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
So up next, we have Valencia Bay, who will be talking about user inclusion. Focus on the user as you develop your product. So, bear with me a second.
Hello, I'm Valencia Bay, and I have been a UX researcher, a UX practitioner for about 22 years. I got into the field as a technical writer and got into the field before it was even called UX. So I'm excited to share this information with you today based on my years of experience working with startups, working B2B, B2C, in every situation for corporations and then on my own. For every environment I've worked in, there has been some level of omission or oversight when it comes to user research. So I want to talk today about the importance of focusing on the user as you develop the product and the reasons why. So my talk is a condensed talk. So feel free to again reach out to me on LinkedIn or through the Slack channel that they're going to share with you for additional information. But I've summarized some of the highlights there for research, and so we can get started. So product design should always include user-centered research. It seems obvious, but many times it's omitted because they say there's no time, we don't have anyone to do it. How does this differ from marketing research? We have our quantitative data, we have our analytics. Why do we need user research? Well, we need user research because the product team has great ideas. Typically, the product team is a creative team of individuals who really, really know their stuff, and they're excited about developing the product. They have a lot of knowledge, but they're too close. As a product team, we're often we're too close to the product and to the rest. We're just too close. So we need someone to give us a fresh perspective and a more accurate perspective, because analytics and data will tell one story and our ideas are one story, but we're typically focused on one thing, many times for monetization, of course, because if you sell the product, you make money. And of course, that's the reason why we exist, sales, marketing, and product. We're selling a product, but research is important because we have to understand what we're developing and why we're developing it, so that it can really meet the needs of the end user. And some ways that we can gather feedback from the user: surveys, one-on-one interviews, reviewing analytics, usability testing, and then focus groups. So next slide, please. Research is critical again because we have business needs and we have business needs, and then we have the user needs. Sometimes those things align, sometimes those things don't. So it helps us to set priorities. Those larger projects sometimes are planned. We have the product roadmap. As was mentioned in the last talk, we have the product roadmap. So how do we prioritize those things? Where should the money go? What are we developing and why? And what should our focus be? So that's one way that research can help. We can help set those priorities by talking to users, gathering feedback, looking at analytics, and painting the whole picture for the product team to say, okay, this is why we need this, and this is going to meet this need, or this particular feature or this particular project should be backlogged because it won't exactly meet all of our needs at this time. So those are some of the things that user research can help weigh in on, some of the decisions that user research can help weigh in on. Next slide. Another reason why so prior to deciding ideally you would gather user perspective before planning a project. That's not always possible because you may not have the personnel, you may not have the bandwidth, you may not have the funding. And you may think, okay, we're in a time crunch. We want to get this up. We want to get this launched within 6 months. It's always still a good idea to do some kind of user research. Just take a few weeks, 2 to 3 weeks to do user research, whether it's a quick survey, whether it's a focus groups, one-on-one interviews, and I'll get into those a little bit later. It's really important to get that user feedback to help either vet the direction or help you to understand, help the product team to understand, we need to pivot, we need to shift because we're thinking we made this assumption and now we're looking at the data and now we're looking at the research and we're realizing that there's something that we're missing or something isn't aligning. So let's take a moment and really talk to users and understand what users need. And that saves a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of money as you move forward with the project, because you have some things that may be assumptions, and then those can be straightened out initially before you get into the very expensive process of development. And understanding the journey doesn't require a lot of effort. It's really about talking to users, understanding their needs, and designing the product to meet their needs. So next slide, please. So research can be conducted at any phase. So once again, ideally feedback could be gathered when the idea is at the initial, when the idea is just a seed. But even when you get to the design phase where you're doing the wireframes, you're kind of mocking things up in Figma or Mural or whatever you use, you can put it in front of users, and not internal users are fine, but it's really good to go out and talk to the people who are your target audience. So for example, if you're developing a new app for diabetes management or something, go out to people who use their phones to track their symptoms on their phone. So it's really simple. Go out, talk to them, see if that product meets their needs, and see how they use the product. And it can be really eye-opening just to watch someone use the product and see where they may struggle, because we may make certain assumptions and say, okay, this is a best practice, this is a best practice. But in that early design phase, when you're going out and you're conducting research and you're watching people use the application, or you set up a remote. You can also do it remotely, where you watch the heat, see the heat map, or see where they drop off, and read their feedback. It's really interesting to see what people really think of this great idea that you have. So sometimes it really turns out to be a great idea and it's validated. Other times it's like, oh, they're struggling here. Maybe we could create a different experience, or take another look at this experience to make it more user friendly. So research in the design phase is important. And then during development, just to be sure that you're on task and that things work the way that they should, you can do usability testing during development. And then there's also value in post-launch. So, all right, so we've built this thing, we've done some user testing, or even if you haven't done any user testing at all, you didn't have the bandwidth, you didn't have so you can also always come in and really and conduct a usability test, or just send out a survey to people and ask them what about the features and the functionality, because user feedback is very important. And as we iterate the design, so once a product is launched, that's really not it. That's not the end. We know that. So there may be additional phases. There may be updates and things like that. So you can really conduct research at any phase to improve your product design. And the benefits of user focus, again, it helps you set priorities. You can design a product that meets real user needs, and more importantly, understanding and empathizing with users. So you have quantitative and you have qualitative. And next slide, please. I'm sorry. So you have qualitative and quantitative data. So qualitative is we have the analytics, we might have surveys, we might have other data from the marketing team and sales team. We're looking at those things and we're saying, hey, this is a great idea. We should take a look at developing XYZ. And that's great, but we understand the what. The quantitative data shows us the what. The why is the qualitative. So sometimes when I've done research projects through the years, we've done a survey, and we make assumptions based on the survey and what we think the needs are. And then we'll do a deeper dive to do qualitative research, where we'll have a focus group and we'll have some one-on-one interviews. And sometimes the results are consistent, but sometimes they're different. So for example, we might want to understand why a user isn't engaging with a certain feature of the site that we thought was just awesome. And we say, okay, they're coming in, looking at analytics and looking at the survey data. They say they like it, they say they want it. Looking at the analytics data, yeah, they're engaging with it, but they're dropping off right here. So the qualitative interviews, you go to the focus group and you talk to people and ask them about the overall design, one-on-ones or focus group, and then they may say something like, you know what, I just didn't like, I didn't like the choices that the content I was looking for. I didn't find it, and that's why I dropped off. Well, we wouldn't have known that had we just gone with the quantitative. The qualitative lets us know, hey, well, okay, so the content you're looking for wasn't there. What are you looking for, and why are you looking for it? And that opens up a whole new world of possibility to meet a user need. So whereas before you had content, you made assumptions, and you said, okay, this is going to work. And you see from the qualitative interviews that, okay, it's not quite working because of this, and that gives you the information that you need to further develop the product. So it's a situation where you can just create the content that they're looking for, create a logical navigation path, and make it easy for them to find the content. And that's that improves usability. That helps with retention. That helps with all of the metrics that that can help us to monetize products. So, and it also helps us to empathize with the user. So, you know, you sometimes we go to sites as a UX professionals, and we're like, who thought of this? Who thought this was a good idea? And it can be sometimes a frustrating experience. So, if we do the qualitative, where the focus groups and the one-on-ones, and we watch them use it or we ask them questions, we can gain a deeper understanding of their experience, and we can empathize with saying, oh gosh, why do we, okay, you're right. Okay, we're going to give you this information, or we're going to clarify this navigation path, or we're going to do something to enhance the usability of this product, and we're doing it for the benefit of the end user. So, all right, next slide, please. So again, user interviews can help us to understand our audience on a deeper level, and that is really important. There's a thought going around with user research in general, where we talk about in research in general, we talk about from empathy to compassion. So empathy is understanding what your user needs. We know they need easy navigation. They need content that they can connect with. If they connect with it, they'll engage with it. And if they're looking specifically for information to meet a specific need, we're going to present that information in a way that makes sense to them. Understanding what the real need is helps us to get that empathy, where we can move to compassion to develop the product, because compassion helps us to take action on the empathy. It's great to empathize and to understand, but then what are we going to do about it? How are we going to change our, how are we going to change our, will our view change based on the empathy and then the compassion? So empathy is I'm developing this product, and I'm really feeling that I'm really feeling the users. I'm understanding the user need, and I'm really empathetic. I'm saying, okay, oh yeah, they really do need to do this at this point, or they need this at that point. So the compassion goes a little bit deeper and says, wait a minute, so why are they needing this, and how can we make it really fit their mental model? So really taking a step back and saying, okay, we're not just designing this. We're not just, okay, I feel, we're not designing, but the compassionate part says, all right, so if this person has this, if this person is in this situation, so I've done a lot of medical research. So people who have chronic conditions or terminal conditions, how are they going to use the tools that we're developing for them if they cannot, if they have MS, for example? So let's say they can't really use their phone, or rheumatoid arthritis, they can't use their phone. So that compassion, so empathy, you can feel for someone, you can say, okay, but the compassion says, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should make these buttons a little bigger. Maybe we should make this experience, maybe we should instead of organizing the content this way, maybe the content should be organized this way. Maybe the sign-up process can be a little more simple to accommodate those who may experience fatigue. So some of those things, and that's very important, but you won't get that from quantitative data. You won't get that from looking at analytics. You won't get that from looking at from looking at marketing research data. You won't get that from a survey. The only way that you can have that empathy and that compassion and get that information is to do the user interviews and the focus groups. So that's very important to. It's a very important thing to really understand your user, not just how they use it, but why they use it, and then the emotions and the motivation behind that behind their usage. Next slide, please. Okay, 245. Okay, and another way, another user research tool is design exploration. So placing designs in front of a focus group, sharing, and you don't even need a lot of users. You don't need like 25 users or even 8. You can just do as few as 5 users, and they can give you the needed feedback that you need. So get a group of 5 users together and say, okay, so what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And just kind of watch them, see where they drop off, see what they're interested in, ask them questions, and that will allow the design team to explore ideas and iterate prior to development. Because sometimes stakeholders have one idea and then marketing has another and then product has another. So we have to really align. And this quick design exploration will help the team align on the design focus. Okay. And last but not least, personas. Now, you may be thinking, okay, so how's a persona going to help with with this? Well, the persona is very important because it helps with that empathy. It helps you to really understand your user, and also in different use cases. So going back to the example a couple of slides ago where I said, okay, so someone with rheumatoid arthritis, how are they going to use their phone or how are they going to use their device to engage with your content or engage with your product? Once you have talked to several of the folks who have rheumatoid arthritis and you've watched them, you can create a persona, and that helps the product team to say, okay, so Lisa in this situation it's late at night, she's looking for information, and here's one use case. Lisa's at her doctor's office. She wants to know what the doctor is some of the terminologies the doctor is using. The doctor isn't explaining it quite well. So maybe she's going to go and she's going to use her phone and she's on your site and she's looking for information. So that helps the product team to really orient themselves to the real user needs. So what are the use cases? What are the scenarios? And those scenarios are based on the user research. So as we're talking to people, we're getting their stories, we're getting their background, we're getting in this case, for a medical situation, they're looking for diagnosis and treatment information. So how can we meet that need? And the personas really bring that qualitative data to life. So I just gave an example of a static persona. There are also living personas, and living personas are typically we as researchers, we will video our participants and use some of those personas internally. So taking snippets from the story where someone talks about their experience with something, and we give their real story, and that's what's called a living persona. And that really does help with empathy and helps with compassion, because you can hear the person, you can see the person, and you can say, oh my goodness, okay, you can kind of put yourself in their shoes and you can understand what they're feeling, so that when you go to design the product, you can go, I don't think that'll work for this person because of XYZ. And I think this will work better because of this, something that you heard, something that resonated with you. And so that's the reason why personas are important, just really bringing those that qualitative data to life. All right, that is the condensed version of my presentation. I tried to make it short, knowing that I only had half an hour. If anyone has any questions, I can take those.
Great. Thank you very much, Valencia. That was really interesting. There are a couple of questions coming in, so people are obviously engaging in the content. So I'll just pass them on to you. So the first one's from Sean, and he's saying nobody wants to approve post-launch research because people have moved on to the next item on the roadmap. So how do you try to convince people of the value? Because as you mentioned, there were multiple places where you could do research. What's the value of post-launch research when everybody else seems to have kind of moved on to the next shiny thing?
Well, if there's been no research done on the product at all, post-launch research is valuable just to get an idea of how effective the product is. So you can do like you can set some metrics and then measure those. And you can take a look at analytics, and you can create a research plan, perhaps something as simple as a survey, to see how effective the product is, see if people are using it the way it was intended, if there is a desire for that. So it's not necessary, but that's one way to do it. And if no research has been done, you can build a case to say, okay, let's kind of measure this and measure its effectiveness now, even though everyone else has moved on to the next shiny thing. Yes, but the next shiny thing could be connected to that initial project. So you can kind of build a case for that if they're connected. If they're not connected, then okay, you can just say, all right, so I just kind of want to do some post-launch research to understand, if it's really working. And it doesn't have to be one-on-one interviews. It can be, again, a survey. You can take a look at analytics and build a survey off of what you see there to get more information.
Great. I hope that answered your question, Sean. We have another one and she was saying the living persona was a great idea, but how do you avoid ending up with a persona of one? And making sure that I guess to elaborate a bit, making sure your persona is representative rather than being just a single customer.
Well, so the living persona is actually a persona of one. So the static persona is typically an aggregate of different personas, so different people rather, in different scenarios. But the living persona is really like it really is a persona of one. So it gives you that it really creates empathy. And I would say it works only in certain situations. So for example, I've done a lot of medical research. And when we talk about medical research, we really have to think about the end user, their condition, and how things impact them directly. So the living persona in my work is very important because we get to see one person's experience. We get to understand their diagnosis, their treatment, and their emotions. And it really resonates with the product teams because they say, oh, my goodness, I didn't realize that that's what they had to go through day to day. So the living persona, the video persona is really a persona of one. The regular persona, the static persona, you can create that from different scenarios and different situations, from different interviews, and just create that one composite.
Great. So it's really, you need the two then, I guess, to make sure that you're not going very specific on an individual person, making sure that there is broad value.
Yes. If you don't need to go deep, you can use this of course, just use the static persona, and you can always use videos to kind of bring it out. But the living persona is designed to be a single focused on a single user, and do a deep dive into that single user's experience.
Great. Just checking. I don't think there's any more questions coming in. So thank you very much, Valencia. I really enjoyed that talk, and there was a few questions coming in from the audience. So I'm hoping you enjoyed it out there as well. So thank you very much, Valencia, for sharing your story.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks. So that brings us to the end of our event tonight. But if you did enjoy what we were doing tonight, we're also hosting a larger scale conference in the USA in New York in May. So please do come along if you want to see 25 plus speakers. There'll be 800 attendees. It's going to be a fantastic few days, 8 workshops as well, where we can dive deeper. But that's everything for today. I hope you enjoyed the session, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.